Imagine this. It's Monday morning, your team's ready to roll, clients are waiting, and suddenly the lights go out. No power, no Wi-Fi, no business. That's not just inconvenient, that's potentially a crisis and maybe even catastrophic to you and your business. And that's why this control, Annex A 7.11, 7.11, supporting utilities is so important. It's all about one simple idea: keeping the lights on, the air flowing, and your systems running no matter what. So what does the standard require? Well, this control states that information processing facilities shall be protected from power failures and other disruptions caused by failures in supporting utilities. So we're talking about electricity, we're talking about air conditioning, we're talking about water, heating, telecoms, that invisible lifeline that keep your technology alive, because if they stop, well, everything stops. And here's the key point: this control isn't reactive as ever. This is all about being proactive. So you're expected to anticipate the failures before they happen. Again, this all comes back to good old-fashioned risk assessments and risk management. So some examples here of where this really did manifest and came to life for me is we once worked with a client whose data center was brought down when a road worker cut through their power lines because they had a single feed. They didn't know where the power was fed into that building. And it cost them 3 or 4 days of lost productivity and thousands in recovery. And of course, the reputational damage was significant. Now, another business, they had to shut down their offices for a week after a burst water main, and it contaminated the heating and ventilation systems. So it wasn't even an IT issue as such, but it stopped their systems and their people and their business quite literally dead in the water. Because if your business is your premises, your information processing facilities is contaminated, then it becomes a health and safety issue, and people are sent home, and systems have to be shut down, etc., and they can no longer be supported. So again, the supporting utilities it comes very much into the fore with this particular control. And let's not forget this small firm that lost critical files during a split-second power cut because they didn't have a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply, that was protecting their servers, which meant that servers were literally drained of power for just a few seconds. And when power was restored, unfortunately, it corrupted files and systems on those machines. There was no redundancy in place. The damage, well, it took them days to be able to get everything back up and running as it should be, because they were finding files that were corrupted and information that they were relying upon just wasn't there, all because of a uninterruptible power supply that, yes, would have cost a few £100, but would have saved them 10 times, 20 times that amount of money. So what will the auditor be looking for with this particular control? Well, the auditor is going to be looking for evidence as ever. It's not just one single policy. As I've just mentioned there, the UPS, they're going to look for evidence, first of all, that you've thought about the risks to your utilities and how you can support them. So a brownout or a blackout, a spike or a loss of power, for instance, is protected against those kind of risks using a UPS. So have you considered a UPS? Have you thought about generators on site or access to backup power for your main site? So it might be that you don't have generators on site, and it may be that you don't have a UPS, but what you do have is you have distributed power supplies into the building. They're going to want to look at things like supplier registers and supplier agreements, because the information processing facilities may not be yours. It may be a key supplier of yours. So they're going to want to know what you've done around ensuring that those information processing facilities are protected from any kind of power outages and such. If you do have generators and you do have heating and ventilation systems under your control, then they're going to want to see maintenance certificates. And even if they're not under your control, you should go and speak to your landlord and ask them if generators and heating and ventilation systems are being maintained, and just ask for a copy of the certificate. And as I've already said, they're going to want to see the auditors going to want to see a risk register. They're going to want to see that you have thought about the risks, and whatever risk you identified, that there is some form of risk treatment. And that might be increasing the resilience and the redundancy in your infrastructure. Maybe they'll want to see other things like climate control systems. And yes, this comes into another area, power cables and such, which are need to be well maintained. So again, the protection of telecoms and power cables needs to be considered. I would also urge you to make sure that you've got evidence of business continuity plans as well, and that they have been tested, because all too often we see that business continuity plans are very focused on technology outages and such. But I gave an example earlier where a site was contaminated and had to be evacuated, leaving those information processing facilities potentially at risk. So don't just test your business continuity plans around a system outage. Also, do consider this remote working aspect, which I know, given a post-COVID period, most people will be accustomed to hybrid working or remote working, but it's still worth testing as time progresses. Remember that as we film this video, we are now 3-4 years ahead of where the pandemic happened. Some people will be fresh into your business, straight out of school, won't have ever experienced what it's like to be evacuated. Do your plans work? So those are the kinds of things that the auditor is going to be looking for. And as ever, they're going to want to see any incident logs or audit reports which have highlighted any deficiencies in your supporting utilities. So what do you need to be doing? Well, risk assessments. It always comes back to this. You need to identify those supporting utilities. What's important to your information processing facilities? Electricity, gas, water, aircon, telecoms, all those supporting utilities that will keep the lights on. You need to identify those and then do a risk assessment on them. And when I say identify them, don't just look around the building and go, yep, we've got lights. Look, have a conversation with the facilities and ask them, where does the electricity come into the building? Does it come into the front of the building? Is it just one pipe that comes in, and it has one pipe and it has the telecoms, it has the gas, it has the water? Where does it come into the building? Is it split over two separate parts of the building? Does it come in from the east and the west and north and the south? Where does it come into your building? Find out that information. That is absolutely critical, because again, in future, if ever you see a road works and someone's digging up the roads and it looks like it's somewhere near to where your power and utilities come into your building, well, potentially there could be a problem. You need to be aware of that. So conduct that risk assessment. Check what controls you already have as well. Go and have a walk around the building, your heating and ventilation, your UPS, your uninterruptible power supplies, generators. Go and identify those in the business. And remember, you need to document everything. Now, that doesn't mean have a policy and a procedure for everything. It just means if you've identified those dual points of access into your building, make sure that they are identified within your business continuity plan. make sure that you have those procedures in place that allow you to test the generator or the UPS, for instance. Because here's the truth. Technology doesn't fail because of hackers alone. It fails because of the basics. A flickering light, a burst pipe, all could be indicators that there's going to be a problem somewhere down the line. So this control reminds us that resilience isn't a luxury, it's survival. I hope that's been helpful. As ever, I'm Gary Hibbard from Consultants Like Us, and we are here to help you understand the nuance behind some of these controls. Then sometimes a much finer detail behind them than first you would imagine. But as ever, it's all about compliance without complexity. It's about risk assessments, it's about understanding, and it's about evidencing that you've thought these things through. So I hope that's been helpful. If you found it useful, please do give this a like. Remember to give this a share as well. You never know who you're going to help. You'll certainly be helping me, so thank you in advance. And don't forget to hit the little bell so that you're reminded of future videos as well. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and stay connected. Thank you. Bye-bye.